la-di-da as I thought they would be. But what was interesting is I was pulled over, right? You're Mr. Yakir, right? And I go, yes, can you step aside with us, please? And I'm just thinking, hey,
this isn't the FBI.
No. I'm figuring this is Phil's friends. You know, I don't know. But I was pulled aside for my training, right? Wow. And what they told me was, I can't remember exactly. I think, again, I was foggy. So they're sitting there telling me how you first address HRH, right? And then the next time you speak and answer, you can say, sir. I remember that, and they told me that I would be placed in a certain place in the garden, right? And I would be given a 5-minute warning when the prince was about to arrive. And so, you know, okay, whatever you say, you know, I'm not going to sort of challenge where I'm going to stand in the garden because I feel like it. Anyway, we're coming someplace. It was really interesting. You hear so much about the garden parties. I knew about garden parties at the palace when I was 10 years old. Used to hear about them, you know, the famous garden parties. So I get there. I'm standing with Ned in my allotted position, and I could see him off in the distance. I just only imagined that the Queen would be upstairs in her house dress because she didn't want to come to this. So, you know, I watch him walking, and as he's getting closer, my heart is beating out of my freaking chest.
Is he taller than you think, or shorter?
Exactly the height. He's tall for his generation.
It's about 6 foot.
Yeah. You know, and he had the famous walking cane, you know, walked very regal, exactly the way you would see it, you know, on your telly.
And by the way, I mean, at this point, he is an elder, right? I mean,
sure.
It's hard to believe that he lived to 99. I mean, wow.
Right. So he must have been the early 80s, or maybe even earlier than that, maybe late 70s.
Late 70s, yeah.
Okay. So here it goes. This is hopefully while it's worth.
We're rooting for you.
Okay. So I'm finally warned, and yes, he comes over, and he's introduced to me. You know, somebody doesn't whisper in his ear, but leans over and goes, you know, sir, this is Mr. Yakir about the, you know, who will speak to you about the internet.
Blue marble.
Right? And then he comes over and he looks at me and he says, so tell me, Mr. Yakir, is the internet all about pornography?
You're kidding.
Seriously. And,
I mean, what a great question to open that up with.
And what was interesting is, for me, the answer I gave him was everything I had always talked about, summed up in one answer, one simple answer. I turned around to him and I said, Your Highness, if you look over the walls, you'll see a bank there, you'll see a clothing shop there, you'll see a travel agency there, you'll see a church there, and you will see a shop that sells pornography there.
Or a brothel.
All of that is the internet. So the place you live in would be the center of what the internet is.
And how did he respond to that?
He said to me, I think he said something about it being a genius, but I have to phrase it exactly right. He goes, now I understand, Mr. Yakir, why you're an internet genius. And he said, thank you very much. And he walked by. And
amazing. This is such a brilliant response. Having during my childhood gone round Pompeii and Herculaneum, and my parents weren't as wealthy as the families that could have the official, tourist guide. So we had the unofficial whose English was broken. But I remember so much of Herculaneum and Pompeii being brothels or some sort of sex. So, and Philip would know the same, right? That
absolutely.
You just connected the dots. and he'd probably already connected them before, but it helped him.
Yeah, it's so funny. After that, it was a story to tell. 20 years later, I had really forgotten. I sort of joke about it. Oh, if I'm talking business, did you know I met Prince Phillip? And they go, yeah. And you move on. But it wasn't until he died, and actually, it's a terrible thing to say. It wasn't until he died, and also all the Prince Harry things that were going on, and also The Crown as a series, that it just brought back all the memories that one day in my life, I walked in through the doors of Buckingham Palace, right, had cocktails, went to the garden party, right, and had a little chat with His Royal Highness, Prince Philip. So
yeah, it's incredible. And it's thanks to Ned, right?
Yeah, thanks to Ned. He was, if he had lived longer, they would have knighted him. Instead, he was really a CBE, a commander of the British Empire. But he was something. But, when you have a mentor like a Ned Sharon, and remember, I did a couple of musicals with him. We did a bunch of shows for Yorkshire Television back then, which I think merged into Channel 4 or whatever it did. A few series in, as you know, the series we interrupt this week, and song by song. But he really took me into a place. I was a boy from Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah.
And I had just gotten out of college and graduate school. And right after I came out of graduate school, I met him, and he elevated me and my thinking and who I was. I mean, so much so that it wasn't a year when I wasn't talking like, hey, Guy, what do you think?
And what was it that what do you think it was that Ned saw in you?
Well, originally, what happened was he was starring in Side by Sondheim, which he created, and he was the narrator. I had produced and directed a German avant-garde piece called Caspar, off-Broadway, by a writer called Peter.
And that German piece, is that sort of...
Yes, the German piece. And I don't know if you put two and two together, but Peter Handke, who wrote that piece, and I was the first to direct it, he won the Nobel Literature Prize this past year.
Wow.
So Ned came to see that. We sat down and we met at Joe Allen's, the famous, theater restaurant. And he asked me, did I know a lot about Lieber and Stoller? And I said, yes, that was the music I grew up to. And he said, how would you like to direct a West End show with me in London? And I said, well, I'll think about it. No. Said, of course. I had my suitcase packed within 15 minutes. To make a trip over there to talk to the producers and all that.
And was there any point where sexuality, you questioned whether or not that there was any, I guess I'm asking, was there... You're
asking if he was attracted to me, and that gave me the opportunity.
Yeah.
The answer is yes.
Yeah.
Simple.
Yeah.
It was yes. And... as you know, I've been with Bill for, 40 years now. So it was during all my years with Ned that Bill and I were together. But I loved him.
Yeah.
I loved him.
How did you manage that relationship with a mentor when you're also thinking, well, do you want to have sex with me? There's
nothing to manage. There's nothing to manage. It's a relationship. I don't know how to describe it in every which way. It's a relationship. I just remember, my parents or anybody, his passing was like losing, a family member, maybe even more in some ways. Someone who's really directed your life to a point. And, so much so that, I was ready for a very big, successful life, which I believe that I had. So I.
Have you ever thought about life if you hadn't have met Ned, where you'd be? I mean, he obviously has probably played one of the primary roles on the trajectory of your life. Have you ever wondered where you would be if you hadn't have met him in a sliding doors kind of scenario?
I think, even with my relationship with Ned, I jumped from the theater and entertainment business into the advertising business, into the technology business. Ever since I was very young, I played with toys and I built things. And when computer first started entering the picture, I built them. I programmed them. So I would have ended up in technology
I'll never
somehow.
forget you and I in a cafe in Studio City, I think we were, or I don't know, we were in the valley somewhere. And this is, in the early days of IPTV, where we are now. And I still look back and it blows my brain that, you and I were going, right, this is the future, before it was the future. And
right.
I wasn't sitting there because I was the oracle of this vision. I was sitting there next to my friend, you, and you went, Matt, forget TV networks, forget television as you know it now. It's IPTV, and
That's
you
right.
were right.
Yeah. We like to think we could see things in the future. I used to joke when I started the very first company, because it was one of the first. People, I remember at the advertising agency, would turn around to me and say, "You're a visionary," and I would sit there and go, "No, I'm not a visionary. I'm a person with vision." You see, visionaries invent it. A person with vision steals it first. So anyway, that's the story. I think we have to end here. I think we've done a complete...
It's fascinating. I'm very grateful for you giving me the opportunity to ask these questions. And
actually, you helped me tell the story, didn't you?
What a wonderful experience to have met Prince Philip the way you did, and to have that memory. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and we'll leave it at that. And thanks to whoever the audience is listening to this. We'll probably see you next week. All right, I'm David Yeck here. Bye-bye. Peace.